So, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about strengthening positive childhood experiences in collaboration with families. And my name is Bri Twombly. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a consultant at the 10 Collective. My background is as an infant mental health therapist and consultant, where I provided mental health treatment to children ages 0 to 6 and their families, primarily in home based settings. I also did consultation with school districts as well. As part of that, I was able to be trained in a few different clinical trauma treatments, including child parent psychotherapy or CPP. And I was able to be kind of certified as a facilitator in a few different trauma curriculums. One of those included the Healthy Outcomes from Positive Experiences or HOPE framework. And we're going to kind of talk and reference that a lot today as I'm going through kind of these slides with all of you. So, my real area of passion is really working to create systems and organizations that are trauma informed and genuinely care about employees as well as the people who are accessing services. As we are going through kind of information today, we are going to be talking about trauma at some points. So I just encourage you to really kind of check in with your body, the signs that your body is telling you. All of you know your body's best. So listen to your body and do what you need, whether that is kind of shutting off your camera, kind of stepping back, moving your body, or kind of any of those other strategies that you may find helpful. So, just a quick preview of what we're going to cover today. I'm going to invite all of you to participate in kind of a grounding mindfulness exercise to get us started. We're going to talk about automatic thoughts. Then we're going to move into talking about positive childhood experiences. Then we'll talk a little bit about trauma, stress, and positive childhood experiences before we move into talking about some of those strategies and things that we can do in collaboration with families to really help to strengthen positive childhood experiences. And then I'll end by sharing some upcoming kind of resources that we have and events, as well as just what we can offer at 10 Collective to you in partnership. So to get us started, I do want to just invite you into a kind of grounding exercise. You can participate in this in the way that feels best for you. If this activity is not feeling like it's a good fit for what you're needing right now, listen to your body and do what your body needs, whether that is just taking some deep breaths, doing some stretching, whatever that is, please just do what you need to take care of yourself. You can also shut off your camera if your camera is on right now, just to kind of have that privacy while you're engaging in this. So, the grounding practice we're going to do today really can help us to be able to slow down, to help us to be grounded to the current time and place that we're in. And it can also help to start to connect us to our bodies. Oftentimes, when we're feeling stressed, or we've experienced trauma, or just when we're going from one thing to the next throughout our day, it can be really easy for us to get disconnected from our bodies. And we want to try to stay connected to our bodies because they're giving us important information about how we're feeling and about how we're doing always throughout the day. Grounding and mindfulness practices like the one I'll invite you into also help us to be able to kind of press the brake on our stress response system, which supports us in being able to be more present, more reflective, and more responsive. And all of those are really important skills for us to have when we're trying to use a trauma informed approach with children and families and one another. So now I'll just invite you into this practice by first taking a nice deep breath. So now I want to invite you to notice 5 things that you can see. I invite you to notice 4 things you can feel. I invite you to notice 3 things you can hear. I invite you to notice two things you can smell, and I invite you to notice one thing you can taste. So I invite you to take one more nice deep breath and then to come back to the group. Now, I do just invite you, if you want, in the chat to kind of share what that experience was like for you, or maybe how you're feeling now in the moment. Thanks for getting it started in the chat. First time I've tuned into my senses all week. Thanks. Yeah, so when we're going through things, sometimes we need to have these intentional moments where we can kind of slow down and check in and remind us of where we are in the moment. Thank you for your willingness to share. And then present, tired, sleepy, but present. Glad I had this cup of tea to taste. Yes, that afternoon cup of tea be really important. I'm going to move us in now to talking a little bit about automatic thoughts. And to get us started with that, I'm going to put a picture up on the screen. So hopefully you're in a safe place where you can kind of have an opportunity to look at this. This picture is from the HOPE framework and training. It was originally an image that was created by the Devereaux program and was kind of given with permission and adapted for HOPE to use. So as you're looking at this picture, I really want you to just reflect on what stands out to you. What are the things that you see? And again, if you're willing, just to share some of those things in the chat box. And I'm going to give you about 30 seconds just to have an opportunity to take a look at the picture. So as you continue to reflect and type in some kind of responses on what you're noticing, I also want you to reflect, and again, you can share in the chat. Was it easier for you to see risks or strengths in this picture? Yeah, so I'm taking a look at the chat and I see things like the chaos, the noise, overwhelm, disconnection, unattended child, busted walls, chaotic, overwhelming, smoking with children in the room. I'm saying it's easier to see the risks, totally overwhelming, lots of risks. Someone says strengths, child on screen, anxious girl. Yeah. Strengths at first and then saw bugs, mom on sofa seems checked out. Yeah, so I hope as you went through that, and then we started, that you were able to stay in a place where you weren't kind of perhaps judging yourself for what you saw first and what you saw. Um, and we'll kind of start to unpack a little bit about why you might have either seen the risks or the strengths first. Um, for many of us who are involved in social services, working with children and families, or just really any child family serving system that exists, especially in the United States, a lot of our intake processes, our screening tools, our assessments, those are all really designed to look for risk. So it makes a lot of sense that our brains are often assessing for risk first. A lot of these tools and processes that we use too also codify implicit bias. The good news is that we can help to train our brains to start to lead with the positive so that we're seeing and assessing for strengths first. That's our kind of automatic thought that we have. And that we're always having that assumption that the child and the family have strengths. So the exercise that we just did really helps to show the difference between what are known as kind of type 1 and then type 2 thinking. So type 1 thinking is really fast, it's really intuitive. It's happening on an unconscious level. And it's based on our training that we have, our experiences that we've had in life. And we can see that that includes implicit bias. And we'll talk more about that on our next slide. For type 2 thinking, this is really slow, calculating, conscious thought. It's often involving kind of new concepts or new ways of thinking. So again, for most of us, finding the risk factors in the picture we looked at, that involved type 1 thinking. Whereas finding the protective factor required type 2 thinking for many of us. So type 1 thinking is also filled with implicit bias. So it's our gut reaction, which has developed from our cultural and our personal biases that our brain has processed over time. We all have different implicit biases that can impact our relationships, the jobs that we're doing. So we really want to have opportunities to try to slow down our thought processes and to try to use type 2 thinking because that can help us to really notice when we're having biases, to navigate those biases that we're having. Slowing down can also allow us to consciously focus on strengths as well as individual characteristics of people instead of making quick decisions or assumptions. And those kind of assumptions are often based on risk or challenges or heavily impacted by the biases that we may have. So I want to make a quick little plug for supervision here, because this is one of the reasons why supervision, especially if you're engaging in reflective supervision, is so important because it gives us a place to slow down and to reflect. So then we can start to recognize and respond to our biases, which then allows us to be better partners with children and families. So we're going to kind of model that by we're going to lead with the positive today. So, we're going to start by talking about what is considered still fairly new science. And this is new science that shows how positive experiences affect health. So, in 2015, there were doctors Peter Pecora, Jennifer Jones, Bart Kilka, Jeff Lindenbach, and Dr. Robert Sege. And Dr. Robert Sege is kind of the founder, and the leader, at the Hope National Resource Center. And they came together to try to better understand how positive childhood experiences were correlated with adult health. So the team ended up adding 7 questions about different types of positive childhood experiences to what is known as the Wisconsin Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System, survey. And this survey is a telephone survey that is conducted in all 50 states and aims to collect data from US residents regarding health related risk behaviors as well as chronic health conditions. The researchers specifically looked at 6,188 surveys that were conducted in Wisconsin to gather the data on positive childhood experiences. So these researchers are really, again, trying to look for any correlations between how participants answered questions about positive childhood experiences and their reported mental health status as adults. So positive childhood experiences, the questions that they asked respondents as a child, how often did you feel able to talk to your family about feelings, feel your family stood by you during difficult times, enjoy participating in community traditions, felt a sense of belonging in high school, felt supported by friends, had at least 2 non-parent adults who took genuine interest in you, and then felt safe and protected by an adult in their home. And what the researchers found was just amazing and really astonishing. Um, they found that positive childhood experiences actually protect future adult mental health in a dose dependent way. And so, what that meant is the more positive childhood experiences respondents had, the lower the odds became of that individual reporting poor mental health as an adult. So, only about half of respondents who recalled 0, 1, or 2 positive childhood experiences reported positive mental health in adulthood. However, that number steadily rose as the number of PCEs increased, with almost 90% of those recalling 6 to 7 positive childhood experiences reporting positive mental health. That's huge. So then Dr. Charlene Harper Brown and Dr. Robert Sege published a paper in Academic Pediatrics in 2017 describing a new framework that they called the HOPE framework. So they did this because they reviewed research on positive childhood experiences where they tried to determine key themes. They found 4 evidence based categories that described the types of key positive childhood experiences that are really critical for healthy childhood development. These blocks jumped ahead and gave you the name of them. These blocks are now known as the building blocks of hope. And there are 4 of them, and they include relationships, environments, engagement, and opportunities for social emotional development. So the first building block is relationships. And this building block really emphasizes the importance of nurturing supportive relationships. So early secure attachments, if we think, for example, of the bond between a parent and a baby, those are critically important in terms of healthy childhood development. Children also need to have supportive relationships outside of kind of their parents and primary caregivers, with other adults within their families and communities. And also, they need to have relationships with peers. Building block number 2 is environments. And here it's really the principle that all children need safe, stable, protective, and equitable environments where they can live, where they can learn, and where they can play. Also captured within this building block is the importance of meeting basic needs like food, shelter, clothing, as well as emotional safety. And then building block number 3, which is engagement. So children really need to feel that they belong, that they matter to the people, the larger communities around them. Having this idea that they're part of something bigger than just themselves really helps to create a sense of purpose and a sense of mattering for children. And then the final building block is having opportunities for social and emotional development. So children really need to develop social and emotional competencies, which will allow them to kind of overcome any challenges, any adversities that they end up facing during life, right? We're all going to encounter hard things during our lives. This often happens really naturally through kind of peer based play or play with kind of caregivers. It also can occur with interactions with adults as kind of the family members, as kind of providers. We can do things like help to identify and name emotions for children. We can model appropriate reactions to challenging situations. And we'll talk a lot more about some of those other kind of strategies that we can use in a further section later on. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACEs study, that was completed in the 1990s. And many of you are probably familiar with this study. You've probably heard about it before. And it may be one of the reasons why you came into kind of the field of trauma informed care or kind of just social service or family related work. And so there was a man, one of the principal kind of researchers named Dr. Fletty, and he was working with patients in a weight loss study. And he started to really note that a lot of the patients were losing weight and then gaining it back. He started to be very curious about what was going on, why is this happening? So he started to have more individualized conversations with participants in the study. And he started to hear a lot about how losing weight made the participants feel vulnerable and that many of the participants had a history of sexual abuse. Often, the participants shared that they felt that their weight actually was a protective factor from them, um, and was helping them to kind of prevent being abused, possibly again in the future. So Dr. Felitti ended up teaming up with Dr. Anda from the Center for Disease Control, and they wanted to do a study to see if they could find a connection between experiencing early adversity, which they decided to term adverse childhood experiences or ACEs, and health conditions. To do this, they invited participants in the Kaiser Permanente Health Plan to complete a survey asking about exposure to adverse childhood experiences and then health conditions. Over 17,000 participants completed the survey. Participants were mostly white, middle class, and college educated. And the three types of ACEs that the original study looked at included types of abuse, neglect, and household challenges. The study developed what is now known as an ACE score, and an ACE score can be from 0 to 10. 1 point is given for each type of adversity that a person experienced. And since the original ACE study, there have been additional types of adversity that have been identified. So, right, if you look at this, you're probably saying there are more than 10 things that could be really traumatic. There are more than 10 things that could lead to things like chronic or toxic stress for individuals. And that's true. And there's been additional research on that has come out in kind of the year since this originally study. One of the ones that I want to draw your attention to is the Philadelphia ACEs study that was done in 2013. In the Philadelphia ACEs study, they asked about kind of these original 10 ACEs, and then they also added questions for what they defined as urban ACEs. And those included things like experiencing community violence, bullying, or living in foster care, or experiencing discrimination. So we also know that broader social and community issues can contribute to ACEs, and that's really demonstrated here on the screen. So this is illustrated here by the pair of ACEs tree. This was developed by Dr. Wendy Ellis and Dr. Bill Dietz at George Washington University. And their work really adds on how social effects. So, thinking about things like poverty, discrimination, historical trauma, um, neighborhood effects. Those are all the roots of most ACEs. And when we look at those types of environments and events, those in and of themselves can also be adverse childhood experiences. So, this understanding of ACEs really takes into account the reality that many ACE scores are actually the result of systemic and institutional racism outside of the control of an individual family. So, to think about this, we can consider kind of the experience of having an incarcerated relative, which really reflects the mass incarceration of young Black men, specifically in the United States. So, having an incarcerated parent would give a child an ACE score of 1, but there's a high probability that the root cause of that score can be attributed to institutional racism far more than it could be attributed to a deficit or a problem within that particular family. So we want to hold in mind that adverse community environments are often the root causes of ACEs. So, looking at what ACE research has shown about long term health conditions, behaviors, and social outcomes, we can see a lot of things. So, the original study found that ACEs are associated in a dose response relationship with some of the most common, serious, and costly health challenges, behaviors, and social outcomes. So, this dose response relationship really means that as a person's ACE score increases, so does the risk of developing a health condition, behavior, or social outcome. Research has shown that 9 of the top 10 leading causes of death and early mortality have been associated with ACEs. And when we're looking specifically at children and adolescents, ACEs have been correlated with things like fair or poor general physical and dental health, ADHD, learning difficulties, bullying, as well as dating violence. So when we experience stress, when we experience trauma, that can have a direct impact on our brain, and our ability to kind of learn and be present. It can make it really hard for us to be in our learning brain. And we might start to find that when we feel stressed, or when we feel activated, we start to move more into our emotional or our survival brain. We also want to hold in mind that all stress is not bad stress. So there are three main types of stress. The first is positive stress, and that is mild or moderate stress that causes a brief activation of our stress response system. But then our natural coping mechanisms kick in, and those allow us to quickly recover from the stressor. So if we think about things like the start of a race or before a presentation, we may have a slight activation, but then our body kind of kicks in and helps us to get regulated again. The second kind is tolerable, and that's a limited activation of the stress response system. Buffering protective factors like these positive relationships, these social emotional skills, those can help us to recover from the stressor. And the third kind is toxic stress, and that's the intense and sustained stress that can cause prolonged activation of our stress response system. This happens because there's an absence of protective factors, which can end up creating a chronic or toxic stress response, where we end up like really being present and functioning a lot within our survival brain. So, for today, the important takeaway from this that I want you to try to keep in mind is the main difference between tolerable and toxic stress. And that is either the presence or absence of buffering protective factors. So, this development of toxic stress can actually be prevented when there are strong buffering protective factors in place. I'm going to show just a short video here. It's made specifically kind of with a target audience of parents, from Harvard's The Center on the Developing Child. And it really talks about kind of the potential impact of toxic stress as well as the impact of positive childhood experiences. It's a great video to show and to be able to share, with families. So I'm just going to have us take a few minutes to watch this, and then I will invite you to share anything that really stands out to you in the chat when we're done.
We all want to give our children what they need to grow to their full potential. And as parents, we play an important role in their development. But our parenting is affected by the supports and challenges in our lives, including experiences that cause what's known as toxic stress. Stress is called toxic when it doesn't let up, and there aren't supportive relationships to help us cope. That can make it hard to get through the day, let alone be the best caregivers we can be. The overwhelming burden of toxic stress can affect the health and well-being of adults. It can also affect the development of children in ways that can last a lifetime. Stress that puts us in a constant state of fight or flight can make it feel like we're always on edge, or like it's impossible to calm down. And these feelings can overload our ability to provide the supportive relationships that children need in order to thrive. Think of toxic stress as heavy cargo. Just as a truck can only haul so much weight before it stops moving forward, challenging life circumstances, like losing a job or not having a place to live, can weigh us down. And just as a truck can break down if it carries too much for too long, we too can wear down from being overburdened without the support we need. When toxic stress is related to things we can't control, like poverty, abuse, or racism, it can feel especially heavy to take on. But experiencing toxic stress doesn't have to determine who we are or how we act. And understanding how stress affects us can empower us to make change in our lives. There are things we can do to buffer ourselves and our children against the effects of even the most intense stress. Just as redistributing cargo from an overloaded truck can help it run again, supports and services Things like food pantries, job training programs, or even just talking with someone who cares can help us focus on caring for ourselves and our children. And just as regular maintenance is required to keep a truck running, reliable access to community services can help us manage the load during challenging times. Reaching out to get support can be difficult. But things that might seem very small, like sitting and breathing deeply, playing I Spy with your child, or even sharing a walk or a snuggle, can make a difference. Over time, these small steps can build our resilience and our children's by strengthening the skills and relationships that help us cope. And our communities can build resilience too by providing services and opportunities that help all families thrive. Supports like these help build a strong foundation for developing brain architecture. So the earlier we can provide them, the better. But the brain is capable of change throughout life, and it's never too late for a tune-up. Coping with and healing from toxic stress takes a lot of effort and support. But we all need the help of others in difficult times. And building resilience and strength in our families and communities is one of the most important investments we can make as a society. In the end, it will help all of us become the parents that we want to be.
So I do encourage you just to share any reflections that you have in the chat. Just kind of the things that maybe stood out for you. If you're thinking about ways that you may be able to use that video, it's always nice to just hear what other people pick up from things or ideas that they may have for sharing some of these resources. So, the building blocks of hope that were developed really describe a lot of the key types as well as sources of positive childhood experiences that are critical for optimal child development. We know that adverse childhood experiences can disrupt access to positive childhood experiences. An example of that, we'll take a look at child abuse, and that can disrupt access to the first two building blocks for children, so relationships and safe environments. When we step back and take a holistic approach to the child, we can really begin to see how their adverse childhood experiences might be preventing them from gaining positive childhood experiences in certain areas, right? There could just be barriers there that are really hard to overcome. As providers, we can really work in partnership with parents to help to increase children's access to these building blocks where they might have experienced disruptions. So we'll look again at the kind of results from the 2015 study that looked at positive childhood experiences and adult health outcomes. And we can see that the protective nature of positive childhood experiences remained even in the face of adversity. So, if you're able to take a look at the graph, you can see that in adults who reported four or more ACEs, when exposed to an increasing number of positive experiences, the rate of adult depression or poor mental health outcomes decreases. So, if we look at those who reported 0 to 2 PCEs, we see maybe around 61, 62% also endorsed depression or poor mental health. When we look at 6 to 7 endorsed cases, we see that it's around again 21, 22% who endorse having depression or poor mental health. That's a huge shift in change right there. And these results really help to highlight the protective nature of positive childhood experiences. So we know that ACEs can contribute to toxic stress. And like we saw in the ACEs study, they've been shown to lead to poor health outcomes when they're left unmitigated. So there aren't any buffers or protective factors. We also know that these positive childhood experiences help to protect against and likely disrupt the harmful health effects of toxic stress, which can help to promote healing and build resilience, ultimately leading to improved health outcomes. There have also been multiple research articles that have reported that the absence of positive childhood experiences results in a more dramatic negative shift in adult health than the presence of ACEs. This may be that positive childhood experiences actually positively influence the biology of stress. They may do this by disrupting the toxic stress cycle that is brought on by experiencing ACEs without any buffers, as well as by supporting the body's ability to manage regular life stressors, regardless of a person's ACE score. So, right now that we've taken a look at some of the science there, we can see just that amazing impact that having more positive childhood experiences can have. Um, and so, while it's can still be very important to talk about trauma, to talk about experiences that have been scary or stressful that children and families have encountered, we also really want to hold in mind these protective factors and how do we help to strengthen and buffer those, and how do we lead with those. So, this is a quote from Dr. Sean Ginwright. He's the founder of Healing Centered Engagement. And he wrote, the healing centered approach comes from the idea that people are not harmed in a vacuum, and well being comes from participating in transforming the root causes of the harm within institutions. So, again, within this quote, we can see the importance of understanding the root causes of harm and being able to work to change things like policies and practices that promote healing instead of harm. So I really love the building blocks of hope. And for today, instead of going through each building block of hope, I really want to continue to support us in thinking about the need to act across multiple levels in order to really strengthen positive childhood experiences. So if you are already familiar with the building blocks, I think you'll see how nicely they fit into the social ecological model. Um, why I'm using this model is because it really helps to consider the interplay that happens between individual, relationship, community, and societal factors. As you can see from the model, kind of the overlapping rings help to show how factors at one level influence factors at another level. When we adopt an approach that acts across multiple levels at the same time, it's more likely to sustain prevention efforts over time and to have a larger kind of population impact. So, while I am going to talk specifically about strategies for children and families through kind of the next few slides, I do want you to hold in mind that the building blocks are equally important, and positive childhood experiences are equally important for all of us to have as providers, as well as for organizations and systems to have. So we're going to start first by looking at kind of the individual level. And so at the individual level, we want strategies that promote attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors that support healthy development. So here we'll see things around social emotional learning. The first kind of point underneath here is thinking about affect identification, modulation, and expression. So can children, adolescents name their feelings? Can they recognize how they feel within their body? Can they have little and big feelings? Can they express them in a way that is helpful and healthy? Um, this is a link here, so when I send out the slides, you'll be able to access. But this it gets you to a resource that's called Trails. They have a lot of wonderful materials that have different grounding and mindfulness activities. They have a feelings wheel. They have different videos you could use or share with families. They have feeling faces, and they really try to center diversity in their resources, which is great and always nice to be able to have some tools that do that. So that is a great organization that I encourage you to kind of look into so you can use it and then share with families. I also want to think about executive function skills. So, those skills that help us to be able to regulate, that help us to be able to plan and brainstorm. This is another link to the Center on the Developing Child. They have a great resource that talks about what are executive function skills and how can they be supported at different developmental um, periods. Yes, so Valerie, I see your question about do you have resources for middle school? The Trails information has all kinds of great things for middle school and high school. And they have things broken down by grade level as well. So you could just search for kind of that middle school age range that you're looking for. It's really a great resource. And then also in the area of conflict resolution skills. So, how are children learning how to be able to resolve conflicts in a way that feels healthy, in a way that feels helpful and supportive? We also want to think about healthy identity. So helping the child to develop a sense of who are they? What are the different parts that make up their identity? And really focusing on what are their strengths. We really want to think about um, kind of supporting culture. Culture can help with developing a sense of kind of self perception, a sense of purpose, as well as a sense of meaning. And then shifting to thinking about what is right with you. So we're focusing on what the child and the family want to achieve, and we're building on that. So again, kind of leading with strengths in that area. For the second area, that's really looking at relationship and the strategies here aim to support the development of safe, stable, nurturing relationships for children. We want to do a lot of exploration in this area, so exploring caregiver strengths as well as needed support. So we want to be curious with caregivers about what their positive experiences are from their childhood. What are the things that felt good about those experiences to them? And then how are they already or how can they start to replicate those in their relationship with a child? We can support by exploring and supporting self regulation skills for the caregivers to allow them to be more responsive to their child, especially if their child is having a behavior that feels activating to that kind of caregiver. Being able to support parental mental health or substance use or basic needs that really helps to reduce stress and can help to improve caregiver child. Another area is to explore child development and attachment. So really talking about what are they doing to support their child through play? What are they doing to have opportunities for connection with their child? Thinking about kind of terms of like serve and return. Are they noticing what their child is doing, what they're pointing to, what they're talking about? Are they hearing that and are they responding to that? Thinking about attunement, are they recognizing the feelings that their child is having, the experiences that they're having? Are they validating that child's kind of feelings and experiences? Thinking about what they're doing to support routines and rituals. Those help to create safety and connection for our children and actually for all of us. And then thinking about conversations around positive parenting. And again, this is exploring what are you doing? Why are you doing that? And not to come at it from judgment, but to really understand what's going on for the family because they are making decisions based on what they feel like is best for their family. So always keeping that in mind and building off of those strengths of wanting to kind of protect their family. We can do things like encourage and support healthy connections. So, this is a lot of noticing and validating when you're observing healthy interactions or you hear about positive connection moments. Supporting connections with other people, because more connections can lead to more support for the child and family. So, considering other family members, coaches, pastors, other community people. Thinking about supporting peer relationships, you could consider things like having healthy dating programs to support with some of those more kind of romantic relationships. And then modeling healthy relationships. So we want to try to lead, explore, and build on strengths. So this starts with our intake process. This starts with how we're doing assessments and screening. We want to be really transparent about these things. Why are we doing them? What is it that we're going to be doing? How are we talking with families about positive childhood experiences? How are we creating safe spaces for the families to talk about things? Um, how are we celebrating when we are recognizing and seeing these? How are we reframing what families may share with us to that it's actually a strength? So, for example, if a parent was talking about how their child always yells at them to do things, to be able to kind of reflect back, like, wow, it sounds like your child has really found his voice, and to be able to share that. And then within the relationships with families, modeling things like empathy and compassion, non-judgment, and reflection, some of those healthy relational skills. For community, we really want to look here at strategies that focus on improving the physical and social environments in order to create safe, equitable communities that promote belonging. So, here would be doing things like assessing for safety and creating safety plans. This could be around school and the environments, looking at things like access to guns, alcohol, drugs, trying to identify safe places to play outdoors. And this is kind of a when possible one because we know having access to safe spaces outdoors, especially in nature, is an equity issue as well, which goes into kind of our societal um, kind of bucket when we'll talk about that. We can think of things like partnering with legal aid as a resource for families. This can help to empower families to take action against landlords when the landlords are not meeting basic health codes. We can encourage families to have conversations with their children about school and not how was school, what did you do at school, but questions like, does their child feel safe in school? Does their child feel like they're being treated well in school? And if things do come up, being able to brainstorm solutions with the child and then potentially the school as well. Then being able to provide resources and link families. We want to consider things like childcare resources, such as subsidies and access to early Head Start and Head Start. As much as we can, we want to be really aware of community resources and to help to link families to them. This can also mean developing relationships with people who work at the other organizations so that you can really talk to families about what the services are, what they might expect when they go there for services. How can they actually physically access those services? The clearer we are, the better it is for families. And then we want to try to identify any barriers the family has to accessing those resources and help to create a plan to remove those barriers. So we want to think about things like, do they have transportation? Is there public transportation that can get there? How much time would it take? And then being able to say, is this a resource that fits or is this a resource that doesn't fit? And let's look for something else. And then looking to create a sense of connection and belonging. So, encouraging and supporting participation in community events, exploring and encouraging families' cultural traditions, continuing to encourage participation in organized community events. So, things like sports, arts, music. And again, here we want to explore if there are any barriers to being able to access those things as well as possible solutions. And then trying to make sure that places are safe and equitable. So we can ask families, what does safety mean to you? What does it feel like to you? What may you need from me and the organization in order to feel safe? We can share our pronouns. We can ask people what name they would like us to use, which pronouns they would like us to use. We can make sure that we have gender inclusive bathrooms, those types of strategies to support those feelings of safety and kind of equitable environments. So in this image, this is again from the Center for Community Resilience. And we see here how the leaves of the tree are really full of positive factors. They include things when we look at it like safe and stable neighborhoods, healthy and supported individuals and families. And these are made possible because the soil here is filled with equitable and positive policies and practices. So some of those are fair policing practices, livable wages. And so if we're really wanting individuals and communities to thrive, we want to be able to advocate for systemic changes that are equitable and trauma informed. So another quote here from Sean Ginwright again is when people advocate for policies and opportunities that address causes of trauma, such as lack of access to mental health, these activities contribute to a sense of purpose, power, and control over life situations. All of these are ingredients necessary to restore well being and healing. And so, here at the societal level, these strategies are really aimed to create policies and practices that prevent ACEs and promote positive childhood experiences. So, a lot of research has shown that parents facing financial hardships are more likely to experience stress, depression, and conflict in their relationships and family. And all of those things can directly impact parenting and increase the risk for violence and other ACEs. So, some things that we can advocate for are strengthening household financial security. So, things like livable wages, access to high quality early childhood services, paid parental leave, fair lending practices, affordable housing. And then also there's that addressing causes of trauma. So, what are things that prevent access to mental health care? Things like policing and incarceration practices, um, supporting gender affirming healthcare for individuals. And so some of these things we may have some control over, we may able to do because of the position and the power that we have. Many of the things may be outside of our control, or we don't have the power. And so that's when we can advocate for these changes. And when appropriate, we can empower families and adolescents in advocating for these changes too. um, we may be able to create a partnership with like a local or state advocacy center, and they can help to provide resources around how to advocate, letter templates, social media campaigns, so we can really feel confident in being able to advocate for these things. So what I went over today is just kind of some like drops in the water. Each of these kind of four areas that we looked at, we could spend a really large chunk of time on, and maybe we'll come back in some future webinars to dig deeper in them. But for today, I just really wanted to be able to kind of introduce them and hopefully give some strategies for you to kind of start thinking about, and kind of start wondering about how you could kind of implement those, again, to kind of lead with those strengths and positives when you are kind of partnering with families, and always remembering to kind of center the voices and experiences of those who are partnering with, in all of the services. So, just to kind of wrap things up today, here are some of the things that we can partner with you at the Tend Collective. So, we can do things like organizational and community assessments, and we can provide coaching and leadership development, different training series that you may need in trauma informed topics, psychological safety, DEI. You can support with program creation, implementation, and evaluation. So, if you're looking and you're wondering, okay, now I know this information about positive childhood experiences, but how do I really put this into practice and policy in our evaluation within the organization? We can partner with you on that process as well. Then we can support with kind of grant writing, community engagement management, and educational content creation. The roadmap for how services often look, but it would always be kind of tailored to what you need, is that we would start with assessment. We would provide a report on findings, again, highlighting strengths, looking at ways that we can build on those, and then identifying some of those areas to grow. And for those, then you would receive customized training, coaching, and evaluation services. We would regularly monitor and assess the progress, and then provide a sustainability plan kind of as we are phasing out of support. There are a few upcoming events. So we're going to be launching our Creating Caring Communities event. We're going to be talking with one of the authors of Restoring the Kinship Worldview. That's going to be Thursday, May 16th, from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. Um, we're going to be talking about the book, Restoring the Kinship Worldview. You do not have to read the book to attend. If you just want to come and kind of listen to some conversation, or engage, you are more than welcome to do that. So we hope to see you there. And then our founder, Allison, and I, every Thursday, from 12 to 1 Eastern, have a LinkedIn Live where we talk about trauma informed news. So we share information on research that has come out, and on programs that are working to become more trauma informed, or to create more psychological safety. And so if you are interested in working with us, please reach out through either the form on our website or you can email Allison so we can set up a time to talk about your needs. Our website and then Allison's email are right here on this slide. And as a reminder, you will be getting access to these slides, so you'll have that. But I just wanted to thank all of you for taking some of your time out of your day to join me here today. If you do have kind of any lingering questions or thoughts, you can again kind of reach out either to Allison's email or on our website, and we'd be more than happy to connect. But thank you all for your time today. I hope you are able to kind of keep strengths of the family at the forefront of your work and help to move it from that type 1 to type 2 thinking. And take care, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.